Hey everyone, I'm Matt Payne, and this is episode 447 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen, a podcast that goes beyond camera gear with candid conversations exploring creativity, motivation, inspiration, and the craft of photography. Each week, I sit down with photographers and creatives to dig into the why behind the work with a special focus on landscape, nature, and wildlife photography. My guest this week is Owen Deutsch, a celebrated bird photographer who spent 20 years in fashion photography before trading runways for rainforests. We talk about his remarkable shift in focus, his new book, Birds of the Tropical Andes, and how his work blends fine art, storytelling, and conservation. Owen shares insights from the field, from photographing in the harsh beauty of the Andes to finding creative opportunities closer to home, along with practical tips for anyone looking to elevate their bird photography. Okay, here's my conversation with Owen Deutsch. All right, Owen Deutsch, it's great to have you on the podcast.
A little nervous too, Matt, but I think I'm talking about something I have a right to talk about.
Awesome, man. Passion is what it's all about. Based on the few minutes we've been talking before hitting record, I feel like you've got plenty of that.
I used to be involved in other businesses and I'd have some people working for me and they weren't having fun. I said, if you don't like what you're doing, you better find something else.
There you go.
Never felt it deeper than I do now.
Awesome,
Anyway.
man. So, Owen, for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I live in Chicago, Illinois. Currently, I'm a bird photographer, but I've had a long career related to photography, design, and beauty. Beauty and fun. That's what I'm all about, and I've been doing it for a long time. Married, I have one son, lived here all my life, near north side of Chicago. Been passionate about whatever I do. Growing up, I didn't know the word passion. I developed that later. Once it got there, it grew and expanded. I'm lucky I found something that carried throughout my whole life, even though there were different directions. It was always about the same thing.
So let's talk about how you got into photography. First, I want you to tell us a little bit about anything that led up to becoming a photographer, and then tell us a little bit about how the interest in photography got sparked.
Sparked is a good word. And started when I was 11 years old. I was a normal 11-year-old kid playing on the street. One day I was at a local community center where we would play ping pong and pool. Somebody came out from the back who I knew and saw me there and said, "Hey, how would you like to come back here and see what we're doing in the darkroom?" That sounds fun.
And you're like, what the heck is a darkroom?
A whole new world opened up to me. I watched pictures developing, black and white pictures coming out of the developer, and it was pure magic. So after I left there, I was so excited. I got home, asked my father, I said, "Dad, I want to build a darkroom." "What do you mean you want to?" Well, I said I was in the darkroom at the community center, and it was amazing. "Well, what do you need?" He said, "There's a corner in the basement where we could close it off a little bit and build a darkroom." He said, "I have some old carpet. We can tack it up on the wall. It's pretty thick. Blacks it out. I'll put a couple tables in there and we'll have a darkroom." I went to Sears Roebuck and bought a darkroom kit. $11.56. I have the receipt still in my files. My parents said, "You try things and you're always giving them up." Well, I surprised them this time because I kept doing it. I took that darkroom kit and developed film. My friends at school were asking me, "What are you doing with this film?" I said, "I'm developing pictures." He said, "Would you develop some for me?" Sure. So I started developing pictures for my friends and made a little money at it. Then my first big, after that, I learned enough where at school there were clubs, men's clubs, boys clubs, girls clubs. They had jackets from a local sporting goods store. I came up with the idea. I went to Ned Singer's sports score and I asked him, "If you give me the names of your contacts, of people who have bought, I'll call them, contact them, and arrange to take their club photographs." I told Ned I would bring him a photograph that he put up on his wall. The kids will come in and everybody's going to want to have their picture up on the wall. It's very popular. That was the beginning. That went on for about 5 years. I made a lot of money because each club had 40 kids, and that's how it started. I became known in school as the photographer. Then I got into my senior year and I went to a local community college. I took a photography class. The instructor was good, but I knew almost as much as he did. They called that class chemistry. When I applied to the University of Illinois and I put in my transcript, I had an A in chemistry. I got a D in chemistry in school, but it got me in there. So I did 2 years at Illinois. I got a notice. I had to declare a major. I wasn't prepared for this. I said, I'm not going to be a doctor, a lawyer, all the things that they do in school. I wanted to be a photographer. So I decided I would leave Illinois and apply to get work at some commercial photography studios, which I did. My first studio was strict commercial, it was technical, great background for me. While I was there, I read a magazine article that had a gorgeous spread, wonderful story about this amazing fashion photographer called Victor Scribnesky. He had a major career. I applied there, I called for an appointment, showed them my sample case. They said, "You're not a model." I said, "No, mostly models come there." He says, "How did you know I was looking for an assistant?" Whoa, you are? I didn't know you were. It's just a blind call. So I applied there, and he hired me because of all the background and knowledge I had. He didn't even have strobes, but I knew how to do all that. I processed his color film, and that's how it got started. I worked for Victor for 4 years. My goal was always to go into business for myself, because having been in the community at this point and seeing what other people were doing, these guys are other photographers. They'd make any money, they'd buy a camera, or they'd waste it. Or they would never get anywhere. His biggest client was Marshall Fields, a big department store. My plan was to go into business for myself. I rented an apartment near north side of Chicago where all the creative people. I built a studio in my apartment. The living room was 10-foot ceilings, 20 by 24 foot in size. I had my studio there. In the kitchen, I built a darkroom. I built my enlarger in there. I had built a sink to go in there, and that was my darkroom. The model's room was my bathroom. I put a big glass mirror with bulbs on the top where the models would work. My bedroom was my office. Where my bed was, I had a desk, and that was my studio. My first year, I worked hard, made enough to buy a building. My first wife said how cheap I was. I worked for 1 year at this studio, and then I found a building where I could have my own studio. I built that studio, and this is where I learned about building construction. I hired a contractor, an architect, bought a 4-story building in the near north side, and made my studio there.
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, like, you did a 20-year career in fashion photography, and then you transitioned to becoming a bird photographer. Tell us about that stint and that transition.
I left out a 20-year gap. While I was doing photography, I had an assistant and a stylist. While they were picking up pictures and printing pictures, etc., doing a lot of the technical stuff, I started doing real estate. 2 blocks away, there was a building I bought, a 3-flat. I bought it, remodeled it, and I did a number of those over the next 10 years. I started doing well in my real estate development, doing that as I was doing in my photography, because so many people in photography are struggling. It's difficult to make money in photography, but I mixed it up with the real estate also. When I was in photography for about 15 years and my real estate was going along pretty well, I said, I think I'm maybe going to retire from photography. I always believed if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you got to find out. So my life was always gradual transition. So I gradually transferred into real estate after I spent a lot of time doing real estate and go into photography. One of my best friends was a birder, and he knew I was a photographer if I could look at his pictures. I said yes, and I went, "Oh my God, these birds are magnificent. I love them." Photography you got a lot to learn, but I'll help you with it. And I did. That was the start of my birding career. When I started doing bird photography, I got a D1 Nikon. that is about a 5 or 6 megapixel camera. So different than what we have today. Today, I'm using a Nikon mirrorless camera. I can go into how I take photos and what makes photos exciting for me. People waste so much time and money. Decide on what you want. I innately have a passion for color, design, beauty. Everything I do is about beauty and composition, color. When you shoot pictures, I see people shooting pictures standing up of a bird on the ground. That's a horrible picture. Go through photography magazines, websites, and look at what do you like. If nothing rings your bell, you might be in the wrong business. Rings my bell. I get down. When I looked at all those, I said, whoa, I got to get down on the ground. You'll see me often laying flat on the ground because if you're using a long lens, if you're using a long, but for birds or for animals, you're using a long lens, shooting relatively wide open. The foreground is blurry, the background is blurry. It's gorgeous. You get all the colors, and also when I'm jumping around, but when I'm taking pictures during the day, people will ask, I've been on trips where the guide will say, well, they'll take off, stop shooting between 12 and 3. I think they do that so they don't have to work so hard. They tell everybody to take a long lunch. Between 12 and 3, if it's a bright sunny day, put yourself where the birds are. First of all, lighting. One of the most important elements of a photograph is lighting and the feeling. You have to have a feeling for it. When I started in photography, I had to use a tripod because you'd get blurry pictures. Now, you don't need a tripod. I can get good pictures I shoot even slower sometimes, but 125, 250, I don't recommend shooting that slow unless you have to. I normally shoot 500, 600 of a second if it's bright, but I don't use the tripod anymore. One big reason is you're in nature, the jungle, and you see a bird on a tree. You've got to be aware of the background and the foreground, because if you're not, it's going to be an ugly picture. I like pleasing pictures. So when I'm hand-holding the camera, maybe just a few inches or feet, you've got to be aware of everything. Background, foreground, lighting. During the day, at 1 o'clock, if it's sunny, the light's horrible. Go where the light is nice. In a forest or a jungle, get under the canopy. It's a filter. If you work in a studio, get under the canopy, and the light gets to be fantastic. The light filtering through a forest or a jungle can be gorgeous. You've got to be very aware of where the light is good and bad. Sometimes when a bird lands, I try to get a quick picture because he's going to move quickly, and I'll move around and I'll see, so where's the picture? What's the best picture? I try to keep the sun behind me because one of the most important things is, if you can, get a glint in the eye. If you shoot a bird and you see his eye is black, it looks like he's dead. You get that glint in his eye and it brings the bird to life. Then if I add that, you get the light coming beautiful, filtered, nice shade, nice shadow. The picture becomes great. Now, currently, I'm using an 800 millimeter lens. With the camera, it weighs 12 pounds. That's a struggle. But let me tell you what it does to the bokeh. The background goes beautiful in the foreground, and it makes gorgeous pictures. My photos have really transformed. I get more and more excited. Sometimes when I'm shooting a burst of pictures, all of a sudden it's like being in heaven. It's like being a kid in a candy store. I love it so much. Hopefully your audience will appreciate my passion.
So I did want to ask, you spent so many years photographing fashion and beauty. How has that experience translated into capturing bird photography?
Great question. When I thought about it, I said, they're very similar. It's all about beauty, lighting. Lighting is my home. I take a lot of time, careful how I light my home. But when you're out shooting birds, you don't have spots.
Right, you don't have control over it as much.
You can put yourself where there is nice light, especially if it's bright day and you're shooting through the canopy. The light comes through the canopy, and sometimes it's beautiful. That doesn't mean the birds are always there, but I'm very aware of all the elements in photography that are important to me. I once thought maybe I'll shoot a bird guide. They're supposed to be boring, A bird guide is to show every little detail. My new book, which we haven't talked about yet, and I had a previous book, Bringing Back the Birds. It was all about lighting, composition, where you put yourself. I think people say, well, see, how do I do that myself? The answer is you just do it. You look, you study, you look at other people's work. What do I like? What don't I like? And it takes a lot of time, and a lot of people don't have the patience for it. That's a word I didn't bring up yet. Patience. Excuse me.
But also, failure gets a negative connotation, and I strive for failure. The more opportunity you have to get out there with your camera and to photograph birds, if your thing is you really love birds. My mom is super hardcore into birding, by the way. Like, she probably birds 6 days a week with a camera. She's obsessed with it. Whenever I visit my mom, it's like, let's go birding. But it's interesting, right? Because it's like, to your point, if you want to get better at making photographs of birds, or if you want to get better at photographing mountains, study images that you love, make a mental note of what you like about it. Then don't try to copy it, but use that in your repertoire, infusing it into the way you see the world and like understanding light and understanding the situation. Take a bunch of photos and then look back at them and then try to like deconstruct what worked, what didn't work. To me, that's a very easy way to improve quickly.
After I take the pictures and put them in my enlarger, or even when I was fashion photography, if you were to look at any of my fashion pictures, you can see them on my website. When I'm doing commercial work, the idea is to get every detail in the clothes, in the lighting. But now, the most fun I've had when I was a commercial photographer was when I was doing atmospheric pictures. On my website, I have 7 pictures from my past life, all about light, composition, design. They're intimate. Victor Scribneski, who I had worked for, did a lot of that. Estee Lauder was his client. He did work for, I said, Audrey Hepburn, and a lot of wonderful, so he had an opportunity. I didn't get to that level, but that's maybe part of the reason I did well. I wish I could have done more. It's all about lighting and mood. I can do that in bird photography. In post-production, I can darken areas and lighten areas, and I can improve the pictures to what pleases me. Now, I have to say, some people will be offended by that. I will darken the background. My goal is to shoot pictures that move people. A catalog, guidebook photos, they're not going to move anybody, but I think my photos move people. That's my goal, to get more people to love birds. They're not going to love birds in a guidebook, but if they're beautiful, they're engaging, it's fun. I see my photography career changing and evolving. Technology helps a lot. And so I have different ways that I'll work with things. When I'm a bird, sometimes in my camera there's a compensation. And I'll ratchet down the compensation from -2 to 3 stops. If the bird is bright enough, or the light is hitting him, you won't see it if you don't ratchet the exposure down. All of a sudden, it gets beautiful. And that's the most fun in the world. You know, what you're not supposed to do when you're birding is chimp. The picture chimp means
Yeah.
you're taking the picture, you're looking at it. Well, it's really hard because that's one of the most funs about it. After I'm done at a location where I'm shooting, I'll do a lot of chimping. It's really part of the fun.
I love what you said about not wanting to take guidebook photos. For a long time in my early photography, I wasn't super excited about taking photographs of birds, but I think part of it was because I hadn't seen really exceptional bird photography yet. What I've come to really love about certain types of bird images is where you can show interaction or behavior, mating, feeding, hunting, like things show the character of the animal, waiting for that perfect moment. For example, this past January, I was in Norway and we got to photograph super cool sea eagles. And like getting those sea eagles to come in to the water to grab the fish, and like getting the water splashing up, and then another sea eagle comes down and tries to steal the fish from the other bird, like getting to see that interactions with the creature. I think that's the most fun.
Life should be, if you can have work that you love and be passionate about, it's not work.
Yeah, so Owen, I did want to ask you about this new book of yours. I believe it's called Birds of the Tropical Andes. I'd be curious if you could tell us a little about what inspired you to focus on that region and what makes it special for bird photography.
You almost answered my question, I feel like, because first of all, I always believe go where the birds are. And the birds are everywhere, but the beautiful birds, the tropical Andes of Latin America, South America, has wonderful birds. Colombia, Bolivia, tropical Andes have the most birds. I think the tropical Andes have 40% of all the birds in the world. The most beautiful birds, the hummingbirds, the parrots, and some of these birds are just so much fun. I watch the parrots. In fact, I got a story about the parrots. But parrots, some parrots and parakeets are like little kids. They're all over the place. And in the book, by the way, is a monk parakeet that I shot in Bolivia. Last week, I went to the south side of Chicago because there's a colony of monk parakeets. They're escapees, but somehow that bird, you'd think most tropical birds couldn't survive a Chicago winter, but they've been surviving for years now. And I shot the tropical birds, which brings me to the book you're asking about. In the back of the book, I have a double-page grid of some 40 photos of birds I shot in Chicago or in the U.S. The caption is, "These are birds that migrate to and from the tropical Andes every year, some 4,000 miles." The reason I put that in the book, because I have a QR code there. And people will look at those pictures. Those birds migrate to and from the tropical Andes. Click the link in the QR code on my website. You can see all kinds of information. Bird calls, alarm calls of the birds. It hopefully will help increase my mission of getting people to care about birds. These birds are now in South America. And in South America, the book has wonderful pictures, engaging pictures with moss and beautiful, beautiful backgrounds in light. It's hard in the U.S. to get such pictures, but you can do it too. I partnered on this book with the American Bird Conservancy, which I partnered with on the previous book. Their mission is to get more people to care about birds. My last book, they used as a premium to get people to buy the book. Their membership was 8,000 people 4 years ago. Today they have like 25,000 members of ABC. They just started a new campaign to increase membership even more. And this is their mission. Their money is really put to very good use. They are partners with a number of nonprofit that spend their money and they plant trees. It's all about the environment, and they're trying to save birds. In fact, you maybe didn't, if I get into the tropical Andes, we shot red-fronted macaws there. There's a red-fronted macaw reserve, which we went to, where these highly endangered birds live. And why are they endangered? The farmers hate them. Mm-hmm. Why? They eat their crops. Right. They built a lodge and covered a big field. In the morning, they throw out bushels and bushels of peanuts. The red-fronted macaws are wonderful, and they love them. So they go there instead of the crops. And what does that mean? Now they got the farmers are an ally, and they care about the birds. There's a lot of guides that bring a lot of people there, so it becomes popular. And it all comes around to doing wonderful things. ABC supports them. ABC not only supports them, they contribute money. They don't do it all themselves because other organizations contribute money. This is their mission, to increase the population of these birds. It was a wonderful experience there. The whole trip, the whole book, that's the direction of the book, to increase awareness and have more people care about birds.
I wanted to ask you about that because I love the idea of trying to get more people excited about caring about birds or whatever thing you're passionate about in photography. I've found that a lot of people maybe don't have the full understanding of what is causing the issues that we're seeing, the declines in various populations of animals that we love to photograph. I mean, you talk about the Andes being such a hot spot for birds, and I'm not an ornithologist, but my understanding is that 1,000 years ago, these birds were much more prevalent across a larger part of the world, right? But because of the spread of human population, industrial farming, bird conflicts with humans and crops, or loss of habitat, bird populations have decreased significantly. And then the other thing that we're seeing is that because of the prevalence of pesticides in the crops are killing all the bugs, and then the birds don't have anything to eat because all the bugs are dead. I don't think people understand that there's this full circle in the ecological realm. You have to break those cycles and come up with solutions that can help those birds thrive in areas that are now encroached upon by human stuff. Curious to hear your thoughts on, like, what is our role as photographers in trying to tell that story in a way that doesn't feel preachy or politicized? That's a challenge. What are your thoughts on that?
You got to be careful about saying anything political. Politics is another subject. You want to engage people, hit their hot button. I think my hot button, I'm assuming that other people have the same hot button. It's about beauty and fun. Who doesn't like fun? But you got to have fun and care. It's emotion and caring. I have a lot of emotion and a lot of caring. I have different levels of calls. On my website, I have a recents gallery. And recents are my favorite pictures that I've taken recently. In my Lightroom, I'll categorize pictures. I have wows. When I was just describing my process of doing a picture, and I said, whoa, that's a wow. So I keyword it. When I send pictures places or use pictures, I can collect the ones I want. I also have on the website the categories that people can look at.
I was just reminded of a recent episode I did with a documentary photographer named Andrew Cameron, and he talked about this idea of know, feel, do. Like that's a recipe to get people engaged to actually want to do something. And I feel like that's a perfect thing that you can do with bird photography. Show how amazing birds are, tell their story, make somebody feel something about that bird, like, wow, I really care about that bird and I want to see that bird thrive and succeed, and I want to be able to go photograph that bird as well. I want to see that bird. Then you hit them with the kicker, like, okay, now here's something you can do that's tangible that will help preserve that bird so that you can see it in the future. And so I feel like that's kind of the thing that we need to be thinking more about in our photography, is like get people excited and then show them a way to care and then do something about it.
Well said. You took the words out of my mouth. You know, it happens fairly regularly now. I was in Palm Springs taking pictures, and somebody there saw me. They said, you know, aren't you Owen Deutsch? I've seen you. Yeah. He says, I love what you do. She saw me laying prone on the ground. I was in a shopping center that had grass, and there were some birds. You can go anywhere to get good birds. I was laying flat. You couldn't tell from the picture. There were cars and grass in front, and I always carry my camera. It was fun. She said, you've made my day and given me a reason to love these birds. People need to see something that helps grab their emotions. And those kinds of things have happened to me before. It's all fun.
I understand you've photographed some of the world's most unique and colorful birds. I'd love for you to tell us about a few of your favorite species or encounters that have stuck with you.
You know, you can go into hummingbirds. Are amazing. Tanagers. What's great about hummingbirds is everybody loves hummingbirds. In fact, I was in Costa Rica recently. Last winter I was in Costa Rica and got a great guide to take me there because he knows where the birds are. He took me where these birds were. In fact, there's one picture I think I sent you that had hummingbirds on the feeder. You've got to have good light, keep it behind you. It was drizzling like a sun shower. The sun is beautiful, and my guide put a beautiful flower in the picture at a feeder, but I didn't want him at the feeder. Feeder was horrible. He had a big spray bottle, soaked the flower with the sugar water, and the birds were all over it. It's a beautiful picture. Some people will think that's not the way to do it. My goal is to do beautiful pictures that are engaging. When you see that picture or a whole bunch of those pictures, people say, wow, that's great. So, you know, there's different points of view on what's right and what's not. Well, that doesn't bother me. My goal is to get more people to care and love about birds. And if they see these kinds of things, that works.
Let's talk about people who might not have the ability to travel abroad and are sticking closer to home in North America. What are some underrated and accessible bird photography opportunities here in the United States?
I've gone all over the United States, from Minnesota to California, Arizona, Florida, all great, in your own backyard. My own backyard. I'm 3 miles from, it used to be called the Magic Hedge. It's now Montrose Point Bird Conservancy. It's gorgeous there. There's a lot of birders there. People come from all over the world. Just get on the internet, see where other birders are, and you can drive a short distance. I have what I call my sites and lodges. I have shot probably 8 or 10 different wonderful locations right within a couple hours of where I live in Chicago. If you live in rural areas, even better. You need to get involved, join a local Audubon club. There's all kinds of places where you can rub shoulders with people who love birding.
Are you using any apps like eBird?
I don't use it personally because it's too technical for me. But yes, my guides use them all the time. They can find the birds on that. eBird is great. Cornell came out with ways to, a couple years ago, they have an app where you can record the bird you're hearing, and it is pretty accurate. 80%, I would say. If you don't know the birds, I don't have a good memory remembering those birds by hearing them. A lot of people do.
My mom is like that. It's scary.
I just don't have that. But that doesn't mean I can't become a birder or a photographer. I still enjoy it. I just know but you can have friends that do it. It's just not something that comes into my ear and I can identify the birds. But I do identify the beauty.
I feel like there's kind of like a unspoken dark side to using an app like eBird, where you have a lot of super enthusiastic bird photographers and birders who rely on it to know when and where birds are in a certain location. And then people flock to that area as fast as possible, which can be very disruptive to that bird's ability to breed or just care for its young or just be left alone to like live in nature. And I think a lot of people maybe should be aware of that behavior that's kind of causing issues with the natural habitat of birds, and maybe wait a few days or a couple weeks before you post, hey, I saw this bird at this location. And I think it's a tough one because you want to help your fellow birder, and also for some people it's like an ego thing, like, look how many birds I saw today. It's counterproductive to people's goal of loving birds.
A few weeks back, I saw, I think it was a screech owl in a tree. I was walking in a neighborhood and I shot some beautiful pictures. I even did some video of it. And they said, somebody saw me there because they didn't want people to be flocking there. He said, please don't post it. I posted it, but I said I was walking through the north side of Chicago. Now, if somebody wants to go through the whole north side of Chicago, I didn't identify exactly where it's at because it's a major point and major problem. Birds will abandon their nests if people come in. That's why we use long lenses, so you don't have to get right in on the nest. The bird will very possibly, before the bird's even hatched, or they're small birds, and they can't, so it's not good for them. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. You just have to be careful. That's what I try to do all the time.
I've never understood the mental gymnastics some people go through, professing a deep love for a bird while engaging in activities that endanger that bird.
It's because they don't understand. Why do people throw their Coke bottle out of their car window? They understand what they're doing, but they don't understand beauty and how it affects. Some people don't, but you have to educate. People need to become educated. Not enough people have a deep caring for nature, for birds, for the environment, for streets that are clean, not littered with dirt. Some people will poo-poo you and say, forget you. But I'm not preaching to those people, and I'm not preaching to anybody. I'm just showing, hopefully it spreads, and it does spread.
Yeah, and the fact that everything is interconnected. We're all part of one world, one ecosystem, and if you push a lever over here, it's going to have an impact over here. I think a lot of people haven't connected those dots in terms of understanding how those things affect each other. That's unfortunate.
We keep moving on. Trying.
Yes.
You can't agree with everybody, but hopefully what I do will hit a button with some people and the movement will grow.
Yes. I'd be curious to hear you talk about how photographers can use platforms for good, especially in support of conservation or causes that they care deeply about.
I built my website over a number of years so that it would be engaging, educational, fun and where people can learn from it. As I say, you'll find when you go to sites and lodges, it's how reason I did sites and lodges, I probably could get back into that story, because when I first started in photography or bird photography, I built a website. It was not too elaborate. Every time I would go to Florida or wherever, there were too many pictures of the same bird. Go with a guide, and I sent him a list of birds I wanted to get, new birds. Well, after a while, I was running out of new birds. So I decided, okay, I'll have a site, this location. So if somebody wants to go to that location, these are all new birds. But if you go to another location, I could reshoot the same bird in a different location. So that's where they would be. I now have about 3,000 good photos on my website, broken down into different locations, so people don't, because people get bored at a picture. But if they want to go to Arizona, Texas, California, they all have the same birds. Now it is more engaging. Birders keep lists on different counties, states, different areas. So I've done the same thing. So if you want to see a yellow warbler, you can see, so people won't get bored. It's got to be engaging, because people will get bored. If you put all your pictures there and they say, well, okay, I've seen all of those pictures. But when you see them in different locations, it works.
Okay, I did want to ask you, let's say someone hasn't gotten into bird photography yet, but they want to try it out. You've mentioned a few tips: shallow depth of field, get low, have the light behind you to get that catch light in the eye. What are a couple of other go-to tips you have for people new to bird photography?
At Montrose Point, the magic hedge. There's crowds of people, all levels of photography, and sometimes I shouldn't get frustrated. It's none of my business, but I'll see a person with a nice camera and they're going click, 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 click. I mean, once or twice I said, why don't you shoot a faster frame rate? Because the bird's moving fast, and you'll get better pictures, because that's what they're there for. Sometimes they'll answer, well, if I shoot fast, then I'll have a lot of pictures to edit. I go, okay, so I'm quiet. Are you there to get good pictures? Birds don't stop and sit there, and you don't, so click, click, click doesn't work.
I've never understood that response. Do people not understand that if you have Lightroom, you can reject images that aren't meeting your standard? You can do Command Delete. All the rejected pictures are gone, and you're left with the one you like the most. Like, you don't have to edit every single one of them.
It's just, maybe they have to hear us talking about it, because they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an excuse, like, oh, I just don't want to deal with the photos.
Well, then you're not really enjoying it. Maybe it's not for you. I don't understand it myself. Frame rate is important. Especially if they're flying, you got to shoot at least 15 to 20 frames a second. Not all cameras can shoot that fast, but even if it's 5 frames a second, a bird in flight, you've got to shoot 20, 25 frames a second or faster, because the bird keeps changing. The frame rate and the shutter speed, you've shot a bird in bright sun at a high frame rate, and now you see a bird under the canopy, and your camera settings are all wrong. You've got to keep your wits about you, and it's a long process, and you've got to keep thinking. And so
yeah, for me, it might be controversial, but I always just do auto ISO. I'm in manual. I take my aperture down as low as it can get, or maybe one higher. And then my shutter speed is depending on if the bird's in flight or not. 1/2000th of a second is my go-to for birds. And if it's super bright, or maybe it's a bird with bright white feathers, then you can use exposure compensation if you want to like dial it back a little bit. But for the most part, like, you paid a lot of money for that sensor and for that computer inside your camera to kind of make the computational adjustments. And if it gets a little bit noisy, like, noise is pretty easy to deal with these days with Lightroom denoise. Gone are the days of needing to constantly change everything every time you take a photograph. Like, throw it in auto ISO, control everything else manually, and you're going to have a pretty high success rate.
Yeah, it's success rate. It's yes, absolutely. And these are good tips. The more people listen to what you're saying and maybe what I'm saying, it has to sink in.
So you said you're a Nikon shooter. I'd be super curious to hear your thoughts on focus modes, because when I'm photographing birds in flight, I like to use zone or wide for autofocus area and have it in autofocus continuous. But I'd be curious to hear what you're using. I've seen people do it different ways.
If you try to use a small sensor, you're going to lose the bird.
Right.
You can't use it. Now, you might have different things. When a bird is on a tree branch and there's all kinds of distracting objects, you're going to lose your focus.
Right. Then you have to switch. Exactly.
So I'll use a smaller sensor. When they're flying, and especially they're flying in the sky, it's only going to grab a hold of them. If the sensor is big enough, so use a larger sensor. For people starting out, they have to understand and learn all those things, and it takes time to learn the ropes. You're absolutely right. I remember when they didn't have auto IS, the keeper rate. That's an important thing. Nikon talked about the keeper rate, and my keeper rate with a mirrorless camera is so much better than it was.
It's way better.
Nikon has stopped making digital cameras, and I thought that was going to happen a year and a half ago, because why manufacture digital cameras, the DSLRs, when
It's inferior.
It's so much better. Now you can. I have some really good. I have a 500 millimeter lens for the Nikon that isn't work on mirrorless, except they have an adapter for it, and the adapter's good. I still use that lens, but any new lenses are mirrorless lenses. They're called Z lenses.
Right.
There's a whole range of Z lenses or Z cameras. You can have a lower budget or a bigger budget and still get a good camera. My camera is the Z9, which has a big battery because I shoot a lot and I shoot fast, but they have a Z8, which is almost as good. You don't need to spend as big a buck, and you can still get good pictures.
For sure. I mean, Z8 and the Z9 is identical, except for the Z9 has a battery grip. Literally, that's the only difference.
There's a couple other minor details.
Built-in GPS or something like that.
When you're all over the world, that built-in GPS is really, they didn't used to have them. 5 years ago, the cameras didn't have the built-in GPS, but I use it a lot.
Well, Owen, this has been super fun. I have one last question for you. Who would you recommend for the podcast? Who is somebody that our listeners should learn more about?
I have a childhood friend who is a creative photographer. His name is Howard Schatz. I think howardschatz.com. And I don't sell my pictures. He sells his pictures, but he sells them for, if you want to see some magnificent, for years he did a lot of fabulous underwater photography. He's so creative with colors and design. Design and color is really his forte. I could say that mine also, but I have birds in my pictures. So,
Gotcha.
That's what's so fun about photography. You can get passionate about the design, the colors. What he does is a little different, but he was somebody I would highly recommend people look and see what he's done.
Thanks, Owen. We'll put links to everything in the show notes, and we'll put links to your new book that's coming out. And I just wanted to thank you for your time.
It was fun. Have a good one.
You too. Well, thanks for joining me for another awesome episode this week. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, I'd be so grateful if you'd consider supporting the show on Patreon. Over the past month, we've lost more than 20% of our supporters. And at this current rate of decline, the hard truth is that the podcast may not be able to continue much longer as a weekly installment. Producing these episodes every week takes a tremendous amount of my time and resources, and Patreon is what keeps the lights on. Even a small monthly contribution makes a real difference in covering the costs and allowing me to keep bringing you thoughtful, ad-light conversations with photographers from around the world. If you find any value in the show, please visit patreon.com/fstopandlisten to join. There are over 250 exclusive bonus episodes waiting for you there, along with early releases and other perks. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.